Welcome to this session titled Writing a Strong Discussion and Conclusion for a Manuscript. So for this presentation, we will adopt the following outline. We will start by stating our objective, and then talking about discussion. We will see what discussion is all about, its importance, the steps we should follow to write a good discussion, some tips and common mistakes to avoid, and an example. And then also talking about conclusion, we are also going to see what conclusion is all about, the steps and example of a good conclusion. And then we'll end with references and conclusion. So at the end of this presentation, we should be able to explain the purpose and importance of the discussion and conclusion section. Identify the key component of a well-structured discussion and conclusion section. Apply best practices for writing a discussion and a conclusion section. And recognize and correct common mistakes in writing discussion and conclusion section. So what is a discussion? Discussion section is the part of the paper where findings are interpreted, related to the research question and placed in the broader context of available literature. It explains the meaning and significance of this result and relate everything to the research question. This is where the significance of the result is analyzed, their implications are explored, and potential limitations are discussed. So why is this session important? This session is important because it shows the meaning of the result, and it shows the link, it shows how those results are linked to existing evidence. It demonstrates critical thinking and help to identify gaps and also build credibility. So how to write a good discussion section? The first step is to summarize your key findings. So here you have to briefly restate the research problem, aim for a clear statement that directly presents your main research question, concisely summarize your major finding. And know that these steps should be done no more than one part, should not be more than one paragraph. The steps 2 is where you give your interpretation. Here you organize your discussion in logical pathway. You describe you describe the meaning of the result following the objective. Describe the relationships among the data. You are expected to contextualize your finding with the previous research and consider alternative explanation of the findings. And then the third step is where you present the implication. You should demonstrate how your findings are consistent with, extend, or challenge existing evidence. You should highlight the new insight of your research. You should highlight the new insight your research contributes to the field. Being theoretical, that means how the finding advanced knowledge, practical, or how they can be applied in real-world situation, or policy-related, how do they inform policy or decision-making, and clearly demonstrate the overall contribution of your research and why it is important to readers. The next step is where you acknowledge limitation. When discussing limitation, emphasize why your results are still meaningful despite these challenges. It demonstrates your credibility and accuracy. So here you should reiterate the importance of your result even with those limits. For example, mention that the sample size was small, but the findings were consistent with larger studies. And the last steps is where you provide recommendations. In these steps, you should offer a practical recommendation based on your findings. You should suggest clear actions or applications for real-world use and provide concrete direction for future research. And these steps can also be done in the conclusion, so it's not a must to do it in the discussion session. So if you don't do it here, you know that you have to do it later in the conclusion. So here are steps you should follow to write a good discussion. What are the common tips and errors to avoid when writing a discussion? First, you should relate your finding to the literature you made in the paper. You should provide interpretation and implication, not just a summary. And also, you should discuss all relevant results, even unexpected finding you got during your research. And what are the errors to avoid? You should avoid to bring up new information in the result section. Avoid to waste entire sentences restating or rewriting your result because you already did that in the result session. And you should avoid to ignore results, not in favor of your research question. So as an example, we have this paper titled Determinant of Retention of HIV Antiretroviral Treatment in Cameroon, the National Epidemiology Database to evaluate AIDS. Study clinic, the context of HIV treat all strategy in Cameroon. So here is an example of a well-structured discussion where we see the summary and the interpretation of the finding. And also we see the author have highlighted the implication, the contribution their research bring into their field. And also they have acknowledged their limitation, while stating the importance of their research, but they acknowledge their limitation is very important. So we are going to move to the second part of the presentation, talking about the conclusion. So what is a conclusion in a manuscript? So the conclusion is the section of the paper that highlight the importance of your research and clarify why your finding matters, providing a sense of closure. It should go beyond repeating your result or research question by synthesizing the key ideas. Usually, a single well-crafted paragraph is enough for this session. What is the importance of a good conclusion? A good conclusion is important because it reinforces the key messages of the paper. It shows why your work matters. It provides closure by presenting the last word on the issue you raise in your paper. And that leaves a final impression on the reader that gives the research paper a sense of completeness. And also, it guides future research. Yes, there are different type of conclusion depending on the type of paper you are writing. The first one is the embedded conclusion. This conclusion is suitable for narrative essay that give personal story in chronological orders. In this case, the last part of such paper does not summarize the narrating writing. Thus, an embedded conclusion is suitable for ending narrative that present information in chronological orders. And the other type of conclusion is the retrospective conclusion. A retrospective conclusion is applicable for essays that traces a sequence of events or historic movement. Basically, a retrospective conclusion should provide new insight that result from historical event under consideration. Hence, retrospective conclusions are informative and seek to give meaning to the past event. This kind of conclusion is suitable for essay on historical topic. The next type of conclusion that we are going to see is reflective conclusion. A reflective conclusion is applicable in persuasive essay. For example, a reflective concluding paragraph allows a writer to consider a broader scope of an essay. In this case, this form of conclusion paragraph contain different themes, lessons, and insights that emerge from written essay. Besides, a reflective conclusion intends to convince the reader that the arguments presented in the essay are binding and accurate. Also, the last paragraph seeks to reveal the implications that arise from the article. A reflective form of a conclusion aims to inform and influence reader to accept the fact presented in a persuasive essay. And then now the last type of conclusion is projective conclusion. The projective conclusion focuses on future outcome and circumstances described in an essay. In this case, projective conclusion form can address negative or positive results from a situation. This type of conclusion provide recommendation. For instance, a paper that focuses on a threat to humanity can have a conclusion that suggests possible solution. Moreover, such a conclusion can state the need to further research. Thus, the projective conclusion provides possible suggestion or solution to an existing problem. Generally, this is a type of conclusion that we use in scientific papers, because the other are mainly used in literatures and other type of science. So what are the steps in writing a strong conclusion? The first step is to reiterate the research problem. And next step is to synthesize key findings. And you highlight the contribution. That means show the implication of your paper. What's the contribution they bring to the existing evidence? And the last step is to provide recommendation. In these steps is variable in the sense that if you already provided recommendation in the discussion session, you can skip this step in the conclusion. So here are the common tips and pitfalls to avoid when writing a conclusion. You are expected to be concise and maintain an analytical tone. You should stay aligned with your research objective and offer new insight, not new data, as mentioned earlier. And you should not be emotional. You should not apologize for limitation you mentioned in the discussion, or for things that you think that you have not said in your paper. No, you should not apologize. And you should avoid to state expression like in conclusion, in closing, in summary, No, because we originally you are in the summary section of the paper. So mentioning it is just like a tautology and it's not recommended. So here is an example of a good conclusion. You see the same paper, the same paper we saw in the discussion, and then here we see the conclusion. The first paragraph of the conclusion give a summary and an implication. So maybe we can read it and see. It says about a quarter of the patients enrolled in ART were not retained after 24 months. This suggests that Cameroon is still lagging behind. The UN8. Sorry. This suggests that Cameroon is lagging behind the UN8 recommended target to attain 90% ART retention. So here, this first paragraph gives a summary and the implication of the findings. And then the next paragraph is about recommendation. Patient level factors, including age and HIV status disclosure, should be taken into consideration when designing strategy. Improve retention in ART program. Targeted research studies are needed to uncover other underlying factors, identify and test innovative strategy to improve ART retention within the HIV universal test and treat context. So here, we clearly see that the author is giving suggestion based on the finding that he got in his research. So to end, we can say that the discussion analyze and interpret your finding, linking them to the past research and your study objective while suggesting directions for future work. It is a section where you add depth and meaning to your result through evidence-based reflection. In contrast, the conclusion is shorter and focus on summarizing the essential point to provide a strong closing. Overall, the discussion offer a detailed insight into the finding, whereas the conclusion deliver a concise wrap-up. Here are some references we use, and thank you for your attention.